What's going on, everybody? Marvel Cross 316 back with another comic book flashback. And today, folks, we are looking at Marvel Spotlight issue number 2, which came out in February of 1971. And we are going to be looking at the introduction to Werewolf by Night. That's right, the introduction to Jack Russell, who became the classic Werewolf by Night that we all know and love today in Marvel Comics. And so we're looking at the origin story as to how Jack Russell became Werewolf by Night. This cover is also brought to you by the great Neil Adams. He, as we know for sure, draws classic covers, and he definitely drew a classic cover for this issue. So without further ado, let's go ahead now and look at the origin story of Werewolf by Night in this classic issue of Marvel Spotlight. And we see a narration by none other than Jack Russell. He says, "On the first night, as though in a dream, I found myself walking a mist-moistened street in downtown Los Angeles. Something was crawling within me, raging to be released. My mind felt dull and hazy. I couldn't think. There was a sound from the alley before me. A glow of moonlight seemed to glint on something metal. A knife. The crawling thing within me welled up, and my vision suddenly blurred. Everything went scarlet, and I snarled. The last thing I knew, I attacked and bore the mugger down," as we see right here in this panel below. And before we dive further into the story, we got to give credit where credit is due. This issue is brought to you by Jerry Conway, who scripted it, as well as Roy and Jeannie Thomas as well. We have Mike Plug on the artwork, on the inside artwork, and John Costa on the lettering page. Editing done by none other than the Stan the Man Lee. And we see that Werewolf by Night, as we continue, was confronted by the police here, and they're going to be shooting at him. One of the bullets connects, hits him in the arm, and it grazes him. They're searching for him down below, but he stays in the shadows next to this river here. He's like, "Oh, my arm, my arm." So we see right here from the get-go that Jack Russell, as Werewolf by Night, is able to think for himself. As we see here, he has thought bubbles. He's able to think he's like a man-wolf in a way. So he's not completely a monster. He's like half man, half wolf. But as we will soon see in the rest of this issue, the more rage he becomes, the more the wolf takes over. And so he's racing through the night. Everything that he recalls about this night is pretty much a blur. It's a nightmare in a way. And when we get to the next page, on page 4, we see that Jack Russell awakes from his dream. And he says, "Was it a dream, though? That's what I'm trying to wonder." He looks in the mirror and notices that there is that little scar right there. It looks like exactly like the same scar that the wolf had in the dream. So now he's starting to really doubt himself. Was it a dream? Was it reality? Well, all of a sudden, we see that Jack Russell's mom comes into his bedroom. He's like, Jack, didn't you hear me knocking, darling? It's almost time for breakfast." And this day is a very special day for Jack because this is going to be a big day for him. He is turning 18 years old. We also are introduced to his sister here, Lisa. And we also find out more about Jack Russell's life. That is that his mom is married to his stepfather, and his stepfather is pretty mean. He's pretty abusive to his mom, and he has a chauffeur too, named Grant. And Grant is also very abusive to his mom as well. And Grant is very powerful. He's very strong. And as we see here, Laura, who is Jack Russell's mom, is very worried about the chauffeur, but we see that the stepfather here says, "Oh, don't worry about him. He's a good man. He's a good chauffeur." Well, Jack Russell never really liked his stepfather to begin with, and he definitely doesn't like Grant. And so that's going to play into more detail as the story continues to unravel. And so we see Jack Russell's like, hey, Mom, I'm going to go. I'll see you later. He said, okay, Jack, we'll get back soon because we're throwing a big party for your birthday. So finally, as the night comes to a beginning here, we see Jack Russell comes home. We're introduced to Terry. I think that might be Jack Russell's love interest here, but we're not really have any confirmation of that. Well, Jack Russell is starting to feel a little woozy. We see him sweating here, and he tells his mom, like, I'm not feeling too well. I need to go out. Something wants to get out. He's like, and we see his mom's like, Jack. And Jack's like, get away from me. Don't come near me. Have to get away from here. And he runs outside. It's a full moon, by the way. Well, when he gets outside, he just so happens to see Grant working on his mom's car. That's kind of odd. Why would the chauffeur be working on his mom's car? Well, we'll soon find out more about that here in just a little bit. Well, we see Grant's like, who was that? Because he heard like a break in the lease or something. Well, Jack was just trying to get away. He has no time to think, no time to reason. He just needs to escape the house. He needs to just think. Well, he falls to the ground and he notices that his hand is starting to turn here. And yes, folks, he has now become Werewolf by Night, as we see that huge roar here. All of this story, by the way, is a flashback as he's starting to think back to his past. And you see that Werewolf by Night is walking. He looks in a window, just so happens to see that there has been a bunch of wild dogs hunting western Los Angeles and causing a bunch of ruckus. And Werewolf by Night finds one of these dogs here, one of these wolves, and he's going to go toe-to-toe with this humongous wolf here in the shadows here. Mike Plug definitely does a great job, unraveling the story here, drawing great artwork here. Just his illustrations definitely are awesome in this story. Well, we see that Werewolf by Night definitely has a problem with this wolf. They crash through the window, and he throws the wolf off the ledge, and we see the classic wolf howling in the moon. Well, we see that as the night continues to go, Jack Russell becomes human again as the morning comes up, and Jack Russell's body is found close to the home where he lives, and his stepfather races towards the scene here with his sister. It's like, don't just stand there gawking, Lisa. Go get him some coffee. And Jack tries his best to calm the nerves of his family, but they're just frantic because they've been looking for Jack all night. Jack left his house, and one of the people that went rushing to find Jack was none other than his mom. And unfortunately, Jack's mom was in a very bad car accident while she was frantically looking for her son. And now she's at the hospital, and Jack's like, man, this is all my fault. If I had not raced out of the house like that, my mom wouldn't have been in this critical condition. And the doctor comes, Dr. Allen, and he's going to give Jack Russell a sedative here to calm his nerves. And Jack finally falls asleep, and he just so happens to hear his stepfather say something on the lines of, I have the money, and he's talking to Grant on the phone. What's this all about? Well, Jack Russell wakes up from his sleep. He's like, oh my gosh, I need to go find my mom at the hospital. So he goes to the hospital, asks for Mrs. Russell, and the doctor says she cannot be seen because she's in critical condition. Well, Jack is not going to listen to the doctor. He's going to find a way to find his mom. And this is where the story definitely gets interesting. His mom is going to reveal to her own son that Jack this whole time since he was a little boy has had a curse, and she didn't want to reveal it to him. And this is going to go into more detail as she reveals that Jack's dad raised him up. It was a good family. They were living outside of the U.S. at the time. And she noticed that her husband, Jack's dad, would go into this tower here for maybe 3 nights at a time, and he would lock himself in the tower. He would always tell her that he was studying his books, and she would just agree that that's what he was doing. Never really argued, never really thought about it. But word got around the streets that there was this werewolf that had slaughtered this man, and a bunch of townsmen came to Jack Russell's mom and said, hey, can we talk to your husband? He studies all these books about demons and stuff, so maybe he can help us catch this werewolf. Well, when they get to the tower and go into the room, they notice that he is not there. Her husband is missing. And so they go out into the night, and they're searching for Jack Russell's dad, and they just so happen to find him in the trees, and they're going to shoot him down, and Jack's dad dies that night. He dies thanks to the silver bullets that were shot into his chest. And when they look a little more deeper into the werewolf and look at his DNA, they notice that it really is Jack's dad, the Baron. And he's like, my father, a werewolf. How could this be? And she said, why didn't you tell me? And the dying mom says, how could I have told you, Jake? I'd read the family tomes, knew it was a hereditary curse, and now maybe you and your sister might be cursed as well. And that's why you returned to the States and married Philip Russell, the stepdad. And we see here, she says, no, I really love Philip. He's been a good husband and try to be a good father. Promise me you'll honor him. Never raise your hand against him. Swear to me, Jack. Well, rage starts to fill the chest of Jack Russell, and he begins to turn as he sees his mom dies on the bed, and he knows only one thing. He needs to hunt down Grant and Philip Russell. That's who he needs to find. The doctor comes into the room. He starts to panic, but Werewolf by Night has no time to kill this guy. He needs to go find his stepfather and Grant, the chauffeur. Well, something in his mind tells him that he needs to go to the South Street near the pier here to this warehouse, and that's where he's going to come across Grant, who is waiting for Philip Russell to give him the money. And that's exactly $10,000 for rigging the mom's car, which caused her death. Well, we see that then Werewolf by Night is going to fight Grant, but Grant actually is pretty strong here, and he has the better outcome here. I mean, he's fighting Werewolf by Night, this werewolf. He thinks that this is just a kid in the costume, but he's actually fighting an actual werewolf here. And Grant is actually doing pretty well on his own. I don't know exactly how Grant, and this story never really illustrates how he had this much strength to begin with, but he goes toe-to-toe with this werewolf, and he really realizes that this is actually a werewolf that he's fighting. And we see that finally, as he learns the truth that Grant was responsible for the death of his mom, he has no choice but to kill Grant, and that's what he's going to do. He kills Grant, and he waits for his dad to show up, or stepdad. Philip shows up on the scene. He said, Grant, you here? Grant, where are you? I have the $10,000, every bill of it, cursed, a blackened red. Grant, are you there? Laura died tonight. I'm a rich man. Doesn't that make you glad? Grant? And we see that, and notice here, his stepfather's voice broke. So his stepfather is either feeling guilty for what he's done, or sad. And we don't know exactly if Philip Russel was truly responsible for Laura's death, but we know for sure that Jack Russel, as Werewolf by Night, cannot slit the throat of his stepfather. He cannot harm his stepfather because of the oath he made with his mom. His mom's final death wish was to not hurt or harm Philip Russel. So he has no choice but to look at the man who may have been responsible for the death of his mother get away in his black sedan. And that's how we're going to end this issue for now. It's Jack Russell as the Werewolf by Night howls to the moon here, and he knows that forever he will be cursed as a werewolf by night. That's how we end this issue. Coming up next, we'll look at issue number 3 as we continue to look at the life of Jack Russell and how he copes with his new curse as werewolf by night. See y'all next time, and go ahead now, drop a like on this video, comment down below what y'all thought about this issue. God bless.